Hi, everybody. I'm Eduardo Bunge. This is AI and mental health. Let's talk about it. We're going to talk today about engagement with chatbots, with specifically mental health chatbots. A few things that I want to wrap up from previous videos is we first talk about different types of chatbots, rule-based, the more primitive ones, and generative AI or LLMs, large language model-based chatbots, the most updated ones. We made that distinction, and we also talk about how people were bonding with the bots, with the conversational agents, and we saw that people were disclosing many things like they would not share with humans, that they were rating the working alliance inventory, like the therapeutic alliance, similarly to what we see in face-to-face, human-to-human treatments. And basically the point that I was making is users are relating with these bots in a way that we did not expect it at all. And what is interesting was that all those studies that I mentioned were using the rule-based chatbots. So if we start incorporating large language models, which are chatbots that are usually more sensitive to the user's needs, we'll probably see that those connections are going to become stronger. So let's look at how engagement looks with the chatbots that we currently have in mental health. The first thing that I want to share is not a study specifically in chatbots. It's a study in which they compare how much stickiness the digital apps have. This is a study from 2020. Why am I including something that is like super outdated? Well, because there are a few things that were interesting. Here we can see in the left column the names of the most frequently downloaded apps in Apple Store and Google Play Marketplace, right? You have Peak, Luminosity, Headspace, Calm, blah, blah, blah. What you can see next is the number of downloads. And what you can see next is the stickiness. And they created this score. The scores are not very high. And you can see at the very right, the column on the right, the ranking. So the most downloaded app has a stickiness that is like the top 17 in terms of stickiness. So there are 16 other apps that have better stickiness than the most downloaded app. Make sense? I let you process these numbers for a second. But the point is, they download these apps, but they're not that sticky. There's another interesting finding from this article that they say, okay, let's see which are the ones that rank the most sticky, has the highest stickiness scores on a rank. So you can see at the very right that ranks, like 1, 2, 3. And if you see the number 6 is Uper. And Uper, we mentioned it when we were talking about mental health chatbots. It's one of the mental health chatbots that is available in the market. So this study was done in 2020. So Uper in those days was not using the most updated technology, but it's interesting that an app that included a conversational agent had a very high stickiness level in terms of all the behavioral health applications that you can see both in Apple Store and Google Play. So for me, there's some promise in this aspect, but this is just one study, 2020. Let's go a little bit forward. But before moving forward, here's a summary of what we just mentioned. Downloads is more related to marketing. Stickiness is more related to the intrinsic app-related characteristics that may be compelling to users. This is the words of the authors of that study. I think this is interesting. The conversational feature of chatbots may be highly compelling for many individuals. And again, Uper was rule-based. So I know that they are incorporating generative AI now to their chat. So probably they're having even better outcomes than today. Now let's see all the all the chatbot applications that we have currently in the research field. So this is a systematic review and meta-analysis. If you are not familiar with that, don't worry. I will make it as simple as possible so that you can understand this. So here, this is a paper published in 2024. It was first published in 2023, so that means that most probably there are very few of these studies included here that used large language models. I'm being repetitive, but I think that there's a huge thing that will happen now. So if we have good outcomes with rule-based chatbots, we'll probably have better outcomes with the newest technologies. Let me clarify something. When a technology appears, in order for us to start seeing publications related to that technology, usually takes minimum 2, 3, 4 years if you're thinking of a very well-conducted study that has like an intervention that takes time and a follow-up that takes time. If I do a quick survey using GPT versus a rule-based, I can do that in a minute. But even though in those cases, the publication process usually takes around 2 years. So let's go. They did something that's called a systematic review and meta-analysis using the PRISMA guidelines. Don't worry about these numbers. The only thing that matters here is that they did their job very well. They follow every single step of what is recommended to do when you want to have a big picture of what's going on with all the chatbots in the research field. They ended up including 41 studies, is the number that you have there at the bottom. So now I will show you something. Don't run away. I will make it as easy as possible. Yes. So this is what's called a forest plot. When you see a meta-analysis, the first thing that you check in these forest plots is what is this about? So if you read the title, it says overall attrition rates. That means how many people drop out of the study for the intervention group in conversational agent delivered mental health interventions. So what we see here is they divided all the studies that you have here in the column in the left. Those are the 41 studies included. And they divided them by studies that were less than 8 weeks and studies that were more than 8 weeks. One of the studies there, Clause 2021, I was part of that one. We did it in Argentina. There was the first RCT in Spanish ever using a mental health chatbot. So we'll talk about that one later. But what they found here is that when you sum up all these studies, all these red dots that you have here that are the means, the averages, when you have the average of all the average, you have like in studies that are less than 8 weeks, eight weeks, the percentage of attrition is 18%. When you go to studies that are more than 8 weeks, again, you sum up all the average, you take the average of all these red dots that are the averages, that means that it was 26% of attrition rate. Overall was 21. Let's call it 20 to be like more simple. Is this good? Is this bad? We have to make it, we have to put it in comparison to something else, right? So let's move forward and let's see, yes, these are the short-term attrition rates for conversational agents. What happens when you compare a smartphone application? What you can see is that it is higher, the attrition. That means more people drop from studies that only use smartphone applications versus studies that include conversational agents. This is huge. This is very important. Why? Because if we want to see if something works, the first thing that you want to check is, do they use it, right? And if only 10 people out of 1,000 use it, well, maybe even if it works with them, I'm not sure that's that good. So being able to reduce the attrition is something that we've been trying to find for years and years and years on the research on digital therapeutics. Now, how does this compare to face-to-face studies? The author says this is comparable with the attrition found in face-to-face mental health interventions. So, hey, we have an attrition rate that is comparable to when humans deliver the treatment. This is, again, pretty good, or at least promising. I wish the attrition rates were lower, right? But this is encouraging. We're finding a digital therapeutics that at least is comparable to us humans. And again, I'm sorry, I'm like a broken record. They did not use LLMs, so it would only get better. Now, let's see some of the factors associated with attrition based on the study that these authors did, right? They say that when conversational agents interventions were used as adjuvants, that means that they were together with a human or that they have some human support, that help retaining the participants. And what is interesting is that just the presence of a human even if it had instructions on how to integrate that technology or not, help with attrition. Yes. What is interesting is that what about if we give instructions to the human and we have the human, the chatbot, and the therapist work and the client working together? Can we do something better? Can we have a better outcome? Most of these interventions use the chatbot as something external of the session. They were not chatting with the bot. They were not using a voice interface of the bot. So I'm trying to think forward of what will happen with our technologies. Once we have voice interface, once we use them in the session with the clients will see that this is, hey, this bot is providing me as good advice as my real therapist. So there's more likelihood that they will use it later during the sessions, during the week between the sessions. So to wrap up this idea, around 20% of the intervention group participants drop out. This is comparable to humans. We wish it's even smaller. We're going to work to try to do that. And the students, the authors, suggest a few things for future studies, which I think are interesting to mention. One is to start analyzing blended settings, that is the human and the bot working together. So far, it's usually more like two things working separately that we check, how you're using it, yes, no, but we're not working with it during the session. The other thing is include in the conversational agent symptom screening and include visual representation of the conversational agent. You need to have like a persona, an icon that the users can relate to that icon so that they can bond with it. That's what we talked about in the previous study. And we've seen that when you include the icon, people engage more than when the bot doesn't have like any image or figure that you can anthropomorphize or that you can relate to. And my other take on this one is be prepared, because once we start seeing large language models, probably the attrition rates are going to be even lower. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this one. What we're going to talk about next week is outcomes research on chatbots, and we're going to talk about chatbots for depression, for anxiety, for parenting, for chronic pain, postpartum depression, and eating disorders. We'll actually have some guests that are the specialized individuals in that area joining us and sharing a little bit of their experience. See you next week. Please leave me your comments. I'm curious. Am I going fast? Am I going slow? Are the numbers tricky to understand? Am I being too basic and simplified? What I'm going to say is that next videos, I will start talking a little bit more about some very recent studies comparing LLMs with humans or comparing LLMs and rule-based, which I think is a very interesting line of research. There are many studies showing that, and we'll talk about those studies later. So see you later. Thank you all. Bye.